Hello there, and welcome to my guide on how to play the Position 5 hard support role. Now, this is a role that many people like to recommend to new players, or maybe have their lower ranked friends play because it's the easiest role to play. And while mechanically that might be true to a degree, I actually think you need to have more game knowledge than a lot of core players in order to play this role effectively without hindering your team. A lot of people say that, I have no impact, I can't win games as hard support, that's why a lot of people don't like this role. But I see a lot of simple mistakes that even high divine to low immortal players make that are really hurting their chances to win when they think they're playing okay. So, I know if it's happening there, it's happening everywhere. And to be fair, I don't think there's a lot of in depth support content out there right now. So that's why I wanted to create this guide and try to break down each section of the game and explain how we decide what do I need to be doing right now in order to help my team win this game. And hopefully that'll help out some of you. Now, as I'm sure many of you can tell from the title of this video, the first concept I want to cover is gold and experience distributions and how hard supports fit into that. Many of you probably already have an idea of this, but to me, this is pretty fundamental. It forms the backbone of every decision we're going to make as a hard support. So if you have a misconception about this idea, then you're going to ultimately make some incorrect decisions in the game. So it's important to have a solid understanding of this. So to start, let's think about how a hero scales. It can scale in terms of net worth, so the gold you collect, and more importantly, the items you buy with that. And in fact, gold doesn't really mean anything until you buy an item. So having 10,000 gold in your inventory, your bank, I guess I don't really know what it's called, but if you just have it sitting there, it doesn't really do anything for you except to have buyback, which, let's not worry about that. Same with experience, where you level up, you get skill points, and depending how you spend those skill points, it's kind of going to affect how you scale as a hero. Obviously, there's not really a bad spell in the game, but some spells are better to have early, and some are not so important until later in the game. And same with talents. Some talents are better in certain games than others. So you want to collect gold, you want to collect experience, and you want to spend them wisely. And then it's also going to depend on what heroes are in the game, not just your own heroes. So, a Slark versus Spectre cares about different things, but a Slark in two different games also cares about different things. So, it's pretty complicated to all put together. There's no, clearly defined, this is exactly how much I care about getting gold this game. But have that idea in mind and try to always get a better idea of it and decide, what does my carry care about in this game? Because that's going to affect what we want to do. The next idea I want to be clear on is that power does not really scale linearly in Dota. It's more of a exponential nature, where items are a very good example of this. Say the Desolator, as of patch 7.26c, is made from 2 Mithril Hammers, which both give 24 damage, and then a Blightstone, which is 2 armor reduction. Now, combine all those components, and you end up with a Desolator, which is 60 damage and 6 armor reduction. As I'm sure you can tell, that is more than the sum of its parts. So, strictly speaking, having a completed Desolator is better than, say you had all the components but they just weren't combined. That is worse. So this gives into the idea that we kind of want to funnel our resources into one hero so that they can scale exponentially more than, say, spreading it out evenly between other heroes. However, obviously there's a limit to that, and I have some clips to try to demonstrate that idea. So in this clip, 10,000 experience gets you to level 14, or if you split it evenly between heroes, you would have 2 level 9 heroes. And you can see they have the same items, but split up between them, so they don't have the completed Desolator. And the damage from the consolidated resources is higher than when you split it evenly. And if you were to have them fight, even though that's not quite realistic in a game, you would find that the hero with the completed items and the higher levels will win. However, that can change when you add in supports instead of just having carries who are splitting resources. Because supports tend to work by enabling their cores, so that even when they are weaker, you can still win the fight. So here you have a Lion who's level 6, which this is still 10,000 experience, just distributed unevenly. And you can find that they win that fight because of the burst that Lion provides. I forgot to specifically explain what position 1 through 5 means, so with the power of editing, here it is, just in time. So over here we can see position 1 tends to mean the hard carry. Now that part is true. Position 1 refers to the fact that they are the highest priority for gold and experience and the general resources on the map. They're the most important because they need the most to have their effect in the game. Hard support on the other end of that needs very little. I mean, I was saying this earlier, but I just want to specify that, right? This is why we're position 5. We are the 5th priority in terms of who gets resources. Now, this isn't always true. I mean, 1 being hard carry, that is true. The hard carry being the safe laner, now that part is not always true. Usually it is used interchangeably, so position 1 tends to refer to the safe laner because that is generally true. But sometimes it's actually the person who's playing in the mid lane who is your hard carry. Some of examples of this are like Alchemist, Shadow Fiend, sometimes kind of fits that role. Meepo is a very good example where Meepo plays mid lane usually, but he's actually the hard carry for your team. People tend to not realize that in pubs, even all the way up to Divine and Low Immortal. I just like people seem to feel like I am the safe laner, so I need everything. But that ends up hurting your team actually because the true hard carry was, say, your Alchemist. And when you don't have enough resources, it just doesn't work and it doesn't feel good. And it requires the game to drag out later so that you can finally get all the resources you need. So, say, for example, our hard carry, right? We could distribute all our resources evenly, but like we said, that's not usually good for us. The hard carry, let's say he needs 35 of our arbitrary resource units. The hard support, lowest priority, feels a little bad, but it's okay because with 10, we're actually quite satisfied and we can do our job. So we take 10. We still need to get rid of a few excess units here, so 15 for the soft support. And this works out. However, mid laners also tend to need a little bit extra, so let's bump him up. Maybe the off laner takes a hit, and the soft support takes a bit of a hit. Now we've allocated our resources nicely through all of us, where the position 1 has the most he needs, then your position 2, and so on, and you can clearly see why we call it 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now sometimes you end up with a bad draft. You might hear teams, the casters say like, wow, this is a really greedy lineup. What do they mean by that? What they mean is that the hard carry, say they need 35, and the mid laner also needs like 30. So now where are we going to get that extra 5 from? Are we going to make the offlaner take a hit? He's going to come down to 12 and, oh, I guess 13. I can't do simple math. You know, now he doesn't really feel like an offlaner. He's kind of like, you know, another support. So if he insists on keeping his gold, do we shift the soft support down and shift the hard support down? But now, you know, I really needed to have like my 10 arbitrary resource units to be effective. So now I'm not very effective. My 4, he's just a little short of his blink dagger, which he should usually have. And my offlaner is happy. And I guess these guys are heavily farming all their resources so they can't actually do anything. And now we're starting to see this issue where we kind of hurt ourselves by trying to have this greedy core lineup. And if we kept the amounts we needed to be effective, well, then we just don't have enough resources on the map. And so then these two are weaker than they should have been. And this is when the game feels really bad. Like, why don't we seem like we can do anything? Well, it's because they're spending all their time trying to get the resources they need, but there's actually just not enough. So they're never as strong as they think they should be until the very late game when they can finally get everything they need. This is why in pub games, late game compositions tend to work out well, even though they're not supposed to, because people don't punish early enough when they have the correct distribution. And, you know, they weren't supposed to have enough resources, but the game just went on so long that eventually they got everything they needed. And of course, that applies in the other way. If you have, you know, a hard carry that doesn't need a lot and a mid laner that doesn't need a lot, now suddenly we have like these extra resources we aren't really using, and it's kind of just wasteful. And that's when you feel like you're really on a timer to get stuff done. And if you win, okay, but if it doesn't, you don't scale as well because you're just not making use of all the resources available to you, and you end up losing to the enemy team. So here are some benchmarks that I personally use to kind of estimate where is my carry at in the game and what does that mean for me? Like, what am I free to do or what do I still have to do to help them accomplish it? So static benchmarks are things that don't really change throughout the game. Take neutral camps. Once your carry is strong enough to do a neutral camp, they're always strong enough to do a neutral camp because neutral camps do not scale in the game. Now, dynamic is the opposite side of that, things that do change throughout the game, which is typically the enemy heroes. You might start the game stronger than the enemy offlaner, but maybe they hit some item timing at 10 or 15 minutes, and now they're stronger than you. And you don't get stronger again until, say, 20 or 25 minutes. This kind of ebb and flow is very common in Dota, and it's just important to identify when are we stronger, when are they stronger, when can we get stuff done, when do we have to wait to get stuff done. The first benchmarks we want to have a good understanding of when we enter a game are the lane creeps and the neutral creeps. This kind of determines what our objectives are in the laning stage, how often can we pull, and when are we free to do other things. So let's start with lane creeps. Lane creeps do not hit very hard, but there are a lot of them every wave, and a new wave spawns every 30 seconds. So if they're hitting your carry, they are going to slowly whittle down their health to a point where, it's pretty rare to die from creeps, but the enemy heroes are going to see a low health carry and they're going to look for a kill, and we don't want that to happen. So, what are some things that helps your carry tank the creeps? You could have high HP regen, so that you just regenerate the damage that gets done to you. You could have high armor, so you just take less damage. You could be a melee hero, so you have that innate 50% chance to block 16 damage, which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, creeps don't hit hard, they just hit frequently, so that damage block ends up being pretty good, actually. And then having some kind of summon or illusion hero that those illusions will tank the damage instead of the real hero, and that kind of keeps your real carry healthy. Now, the other side of that is that if you were to just kill the creeps really quickly and not take damage, that works too. So how quickly can your carry clear out a wave? The final consideration is how well can my carry last hit under tower? So if they're really bad at it, then they don't want to miss last hits, so they're going to try to tank the creep wave outside of tower, which means they're going to have to take more damage. And if they're good at it, then they don't mind running under tower. The tower will help them quickly clear off the creeps, but they're still going to know that they can secure it. So for example, Drow has a really bad attack animation, and she doesn't have a high attack damage. So early levels, she's not sure, like, do I have to hit this creep once? Is it twice? I don't know. I'm going to miss CS, or I take a lot of damage tanking outside the tower. But say a hero like Lycan, he could do either, right? He could tank the creeps outside tower, or because he has summons, he has a Quelling Blade, he's a melee hero with good damage and good attack animation. He doesn't care if it goes under tower because he knows, like, man, look at all this damage. I will definitely get every last hit. So knowing which option your carry is going to have to take, whether they tank the damage outside the tower or can secure it under tower, will also determine what you are able to do, which is essentially, can I pull creeps? When we pull creeps, as the name goes, we pull the creeps out of the lane. So now our carry has to deal with the enemy creeps on their own. And again, if they can clear the wave, or they can tank it, or they can last in our tower, then that's okay. And we know, all right, we're free to pull creeps as we see fit. Or if, say, you're playing against an enemy Axe and he's going to cut waves, you have to ask yourself, is my carry going to die to creeps? Like, are they going to be okay? Do I have to give them more regen? Do I have to tank some of the damage for them? Like, or do I just leave and just let it be a 1v1 Axe versus my carry and they both just farm the creep waves? Kind of having this idea beforehand will help you understand what you need to do. And the point of that all is to realize at what level can your carry do any of these. So starting off, most heroes can't take the creep wave on their own. They are not good at it level 1, which is okay because that's not usually needed at level 1. But at some point you do want to ask yourself, does my Naga Siren need level 3 or level 4 or maybe level 5 before I'm free to just constantly pull the creep wave and she'll be okay? Well, then I know, okay, let's get her to level 3, and now pulling is an option for me. Or maybe say Luna, right? Lunas don't usually skill Glaive early, so you never really want to make Luna tank creeps under tower. So when you're looking to pull, you want to make sure that she still has some creeps, or else she's going to take a lot of damage. These kind of questions will shape how you see the lane and decide, what level do I need to get my carry to? Okay, now I'm free to do this. Let's talk about neutral creeps next. The biggest thing about neutral creeps is that it determines when your carry can leave the lane, for better or for worse. If it's a really bad lane, they're going to want to go, like, they still have to get gold, and if they can't get the lane creeps, then they're going to go to the jungle. Or if it's a very good wave, then they want to do both. They want to get the lane creeps, and they want to get the jungle creeps. So, as soon as your carry can do jungle creeps, you now know that, all right, they can be left alone in lane, because if they get bullied out of lane, they can still farm the jungle. And they're still collecting gold. Whereas if they can't do it and they get bullied out of lane, they're now doing nothing, and that's really bad for you. So for neutral camps, the first question is, can they kill a single camp, right? Because most camps spawn, there's one camp there, and they won't spawn another one unless you're stacking. So if they can kill single camps okay, then they can kind of leave the lane. It depends how efficiently they can do it. It has some like variance to it. But then the next part is, can they kill a stacked camp? Because just because you can jungle efficiently one camp at a time does not necessarily mean you can do stacked camps. So an example would be Lifestealer. Lifestealer can do individual camps pretty decently, but he is a single target hero, so he's hitting one creep at a time and taking one camp's worth of damage at a time. But when he tries to kill a stacked camp, he's killing one creep at a time, but now he's taking damage from two camps worth, and that, like, it's not efficient for him. But if you compare that to a Naga Siren, who has some AoE clear, when she is killing one camp, she's just killing one camp. But when she's taking on 2 or 3 camps that have been stacked, she's now clearing them all at the same time. And yes, she is taking, a bit more damage from those stacked camps, but she has those illusions to tank some of it. So it's just generally more efficient for her. So we know if our carry can do stacked camps, then it is okay to stack camps. It sounds obvious, but that's really what it is. Do we want to stack camps or not? If it's going to hurt our carry too much, then we actually don't want to stack camps, and we should know that. Because then, let's say you stack 3 of the camps in your jungle, and your carry goes, I can't do any of these, and I can't go to lane either. I've been bullied out. What am I supposed to do? And that can really hurt your carry. So make sure you pay attention to that. Then we have the ancient creeps, because they are on their own level from other jungle creeps. Particularly those purple satyrs, however you say it. You have to be very careful of those, because that can really change it. For example, Sven can generally do stacked ancients, but if you put 1 or 2 purple camps in there, obviously you don't get to choose which camps go in there, but if that happens, he really struggles to clear that camp, and now it becomes very difficult to clear that camp, and maybe he can't do it for 3 more minutes until he finishes up some other items to help him farm it, whereas he would have gotten more gold if it was just a single camp that he got to farm every minute, instead of having to wait for 3 minutes to get there. So you want to kind of consider that when you're deciding, should I stack ancients, or should I even be prioritizing them at all? Does my carry even have the ability to do ancients? Some heroes are, again, better at it than others, and you need to identify that. So let's try to tie these ideas together to see how it determines how we play a lane. So when we can only do lane creeps, then both the carry and support are splitting the golden experience from, the lane creeps, and that's it. When we gain the ability to start doing pulls, then now we're adding the golden experience from those neutral creeps as well. That is strictly more golden experience that we are able to kind of split between the two of us somehow. And when our carry becomes able to do neutral camps efficiently, now we can start adding, not just the pull camps, but maybe some of the other neutral creeps that, we weren't really able to access before. So now we're getting experience from the lane creeps, we're getting experience from the pull camps, and some other neutral camps. So we're just adding new ways to gain golden experience for our team. So the sooner we hit those benchmarks, the sooner we're able to kind of boost ourselves forward in terms of gaining more gold and more experience. And some carries will want to do one or the other, and it may limit or may open up new possibilities for you. So say Naga Siren. Naga Siren can do jungle camps so early and so efficiently that sometimes if she's being contested in lane, it's better for her to just go jungle, and that's worth her time more than trying to get some creeps in lane and then going to jungle. She'll just full commit to the jungle. And you know what that means? That means that we want to get her to that point because we then get to catch up in the lane. So if we're level 2 and she's level 5, she'll go jungle a bit, and we get to sit in lane and catch up. And this kind of opens more gold and experience to our team than it would have been if we'd both sat there being about like level 3 or 4 together. Now, someone like Spectre, she kind of wants to sit in the lane as much as she can because she's not the best at doing jungle camps until a bit later. So, as much as possible, she tries to farm lane creeps. And in that case, we're not really going to have the option of getting her to a level she can do neutral camps like too quickly. So now it becomes okay to kind of split the experience between us a bit more if it means that we can guarantee her getting more lane creep. So we can bully out the offlaner a little better because she doesn't really have the option. Well, she does, but it's just not going to be as efficient. And you kind of have to realize that, right? Spectre in the jungle is not as efficient as Naga in the jungle. So we want to put a bit more priority in winning the lane, maybe, or reaching the point where we can quickly do pulls to try to at least get that amount of extra golden experience because we're not going to reach the other neutral camps quite yet. Next, we can finally move away from those last two topics and now talk about towers, which you might initially be thinking, how soon can we take the enemy tower, or that they might take our tower, which certainly plays a role. But I'm primarily concerned with when can we dive the enemy tower, or more likely, when can they dive us under our tower? Towers are supposed to be this area of safety, right? Because they do quite a lot of damage, especially in the early game. They also provide this aura of armor and HP regen for, whatever team they're on. And your team can teleport to the tower. All of this combined is supposed to make it scary to go under an enemy's tower. But some heroes can do that, particularly when they have a lot of creeps that are going under the tower, because the creeps will attack you and they will also tank the tower shot, which kind of helps the enemy team out to dive you. So, if the enemy team seems like a team that can dive you, then you want to be very concerned when you see a large creep wave building, because that should signal to you, we might get dove here. So you want to ask your team, be ready to teleport, or you want to start thinning out the creep wave. Either use some AoE spells on them, or even just auto-attacking them, if you can do that safely, is quite effective here to reduce the chance that you're going to get dove. And on the flip side, if you are a team that can dive, say you are like Ursa and Shadow Shaman, where you can get a kill under tower once you have the sufficient levels, then maybe you're not so concerned with building up your own creep wave. Like, say you do a single pull and it kind of builds up a creep wave. Many people hate that, but that's not always bad, because if you actually just kill the enemy offlaner, then all those creeps will help you get the tower, and the enemy hero is not there to get any of that experience, right? If instead it had been one wave at a time, maybe they could have kept sapping experience from what would otherwise be a scary lane. And people usually have this gut feeling of like, oh no, we're pushing this huge wave into him. It's true, that can be bad. But if you have very high potential to kill them under the tower, then you don't have to be as worried about building up a large creep wave. Now, I should say that I put towers under the static benchmark because technically, for a given tier of tower, once you gain the ability to ignore a couple shots and you can dive it, technically you can always do that. But there is an element that is dynamic, which is that obviously you need a certain amount of HP before you feel comfortable to dive a tower, right? So if you're at full health, maybe you feel good about it. But you drop below 30% and suddenly you're saying, let's not do this. I don't want to die to tower. Like, I'd feel really dumb about that. So recognize what gives you the ability to dive the tower. Recognize how much health you need to have so that it stays an option to you. And on the other side of that, how much HP the enemy probably needs to have to feel comfortable diving. A good way to estimate that is look at your spells and decide, how much damage could we do quickly if they come under tower? And if they take 1 or 2 tower shots. If they're sitting at about 300 HP, then you have enough damage to probably burst them if they come under the tower and take a tower hit or 2. But if they're at, say, 800 and you decide all our spells will not do enough and then they can still tank a couple tower hits, then, that's scary. So maybe you could just harass them a bit so that they don't feel safe to tower dive you, even when there is a large creep wave. Similarly, Roshan is technically dynamic, where he does scale throughout the game, but it is Pretty rare. I literally cannot think of a case where your team would lose the ability to do Roshan because he is too strong. Let's take Ursa for an example. Once Ursa hits level 8 with his passive, some points in overpower maybe, and probably a Morbid Mask, he can now do Roshan on his own. And he never really loses that ability because even though Roshan scales, Ursa also scales, and at a much faster rate than Roshan does typically. So once you hit the point of being able to do Roshan, it is now always an option for your team. Now the reason this is important is because it can help you decide who your priority is. So like, let's say you had an Ursa on your team and an enemy Spectre. Do you prioritize Ursa having a good game or Spectre having a bad game? Now, obviously, there's a lot of variation to that. It could really depend on the game. Maybe you want to do one or the other. But one of the things you should consider when making that choice is that once you get Ursa to the point he can do Roshan, Roshan gives your team gold and experience. It gives your team the Aegis, gives your team a way to play more aggressively. Maybe you can get more map control, get some kills that otherwise you couldn't. It is creating these opportunities for you. So sometimes when you're trying to make this choice of like, do I help my carry? Do I stop the enemy carry? One of the things you consider is how soon can my team do Roshan? Maybe your carry can't, and it's not a consideration. But if they can, sometimes you want to help your carry reach that point so that you open up those options for your team, and then you can go prioritize harassing the enemy carry. Let's talk about dynamic benchmarks now, which ultimately define how you can actually win a game of Dota. If we have the, say, strongest late game hero, so we scale the most, then we should feel very comfortable going into the late game, and we don't need to do too much at the start. But if we, say, identify we're very strong in the beginning, but drop off later relative to the enemy team, then we might realize, you know what, we really need to get a lot done right now, and that's going to shape how we play out the game. All of that is good and true and not what we're going to talk about right now because that's really complicated and probably a different video. The truth is, when you play a pub game, oftentimes just winning the laning stage is enough to really give you a really big step forward in terms of winning the game, whether you should or not, based on your draft. Early game heroes can win in the late game heroes win early. All of it starts with just having a good lane, which we want to do regardless of what heroes we have. So that's what I want to focus on in this video. First, let's think about individual hero matchups. Let's take Slardar as an example. Level 1 Slardar is a pain, but he's probably not going to kill you because he only has one skill. Level 2 Slardar, when he has probably stun and bash, also, still quite a pain, but probably doesn't have the damage to actually kill us. But as he hits level 3 and then 4 and 5, it's now getting to the point where it is quite scary of a matchup, just the hero alone. Now let's add in some of his team members, right? Let's say he has an Ogre Magi on his team, and that Ogre Magi casts Bloodlust on him. Bloodlust gives you an increased attack speed and movement speed, and let's pretend Ogre doesn't even cast his other spells and he's not even there. It's just Slardar on his own, but he's bloodlusted. Slardar is now much scarier because that increased attack speed and move speed means he can quickly hit you and chase you down to get more bashes, and he could probably kill you on his own, even without Ogre being there. Now, what if he had a Crystal Maiden on his team instead, who's also not there, but she provides that aura regen of mana? This feels nice for Slardar. He can cast his spells a bit more, but it doesn't actually change his kill potential because his issue wasn't that he didn't have enough mana, it's that he doesn't put out enough damage quickly. So what heroes are on the team kind of change how we have to think about a hero, right? A Slardar, we can say, you know what, level 4 or 5, definitely level 6, Slardar is a threat to us. But if he had an Ogre Magi, who's also there to cast a stun, we might need to be scared as soon as, say, level 2 or 3. And that really changes how we want to think about the lane. Once we've evaluated the enemy offlaner in this manner, we want to think about how it applies to our carry, because that's going to shape how we approach the lane. Slardar, when he tries to kill someone, is going to bash, stun, and then he needs to chase a little bit to get that second bash proc, which is usually where the carry dies, or gets really close to dying. There's that small window, though, between the stun and the next bash that can lead to an escape, which determines whether you live or die. So when we have a hero like Anti-Mage as our carry, Anti-Mage likes to skill Blink at level 2 or 3, quite early. And like we said, Slardar's not a threat till 3 or 4, so Anti-Mage should be able to just blink away in that time, and even if the lane is bad for us, Anti-Mage should be hitting level 2 or 3 before that happens, so it shouldn't be too much of a risk. Phantom Lancer has Doppelganger to get away, but Phantom Lancers don't really like to skill Doppelganger until, say, 3 or 4, which overlaps with when Slardar becomes a kill threat. Now this could work out for us because if the lane just goes even, then Phantom Lancer is going to get his escape skill as Slardar becomes a threat, and the lane's going to be okay for us. But if the lane is going badly for us and Slardar is getting a level advantage over our Phantom Lancer, we're going to need to identify a way in order to get Phantom Lancer the levels he needs so that he can become safe, and then the lane can return to a state where he's not going to die and he's okay farming. Now, if we have a hero like Luna, Luna is a ranged hero, but it's a very short range. So Slardar, who's pretty fast and can get a point in sprint, he still has a kill threat over her, and it might be a little higher now. It might be he needs level 4 or 5 so that he can get that point in sprint. But Luna she doesn't have an escape skill, so she just gets run down, bashed, stunned, and then bashed. And if he needs another bash, he just keeps chasing her and bashes her to death. But when she hits 6, she gets her ultimate, which is not an escape skill, but it can dissuade Slardar from diving her, because if he has no creeps around him, and she turns on her ult, he'll probably be the one to die instead. So although it's not this perfect tool, it is a way to reduce the chance that Luna's going to die in lane. Now, the hard part of that is that Slardar becomes a kill threat at 4 to 5, and Luna earliest can get her ult at 6. So we need the lane to go well for us, or we need to do some kind of trick to get Luna to 6 as quickly as possible before Slardar can kill her a bunch. I know that the tier 3 tower is technically a static objective, where, from the beginning to the end of the game, it's the same strength the whole time. But still, the high ground gets its own spot in the dynamic slot, because it really is a defining part of the game, where until you take the tier 3 tower and you take some barracks, you don't really feel like you have broken open the game, that you're in the lead. This is why you see pro teams who have like 15 to 20k advantage, and it seems like the enemy team is trapped in their base, but they still don't have any T3s. But 15 to 20k, that is huge, right? And it's strange because against just that tower, they would decimate that tower. And if the enemy team tries to leave their base, they get killed, wiped, hard, but they still can't break high ground. There's a lot of advantages to high ground, which we'll cover in a separate video. It'll be towards the end of the series. But essentially, it does kind of shift depending on what the level of D-push the enemy team has and how quickly you yourself, or your teams, we're hard supports, we don't usually do it, but how quickly your team can take the tower. Whether you have to have a melee hero being really at risk up there, hitting the tower, or maybe you have a sniper who can hit it from very far back. Does the enemy team have a Zeus or a Tinker that makes it really difficult to walk up and they clear the creep wave so quickly? Or are they a bunch of single target heroes that also have to put themselves at risk to clear out the creep wave? All of these things change throughout the game, and that's why I feel that the high ground is a dynamic objective, where sometimes, this is why in pub games you throw a lot on the high ground. The classic is if you're an early game lineup and you feel you need to end the game quickly, you take all the tier 1s to the tier 2s and you think, our next objective is tier 3s because we have to end the game. We seem to be able to kill the enemy heroes really easily right now. We have all their other towers, so there's nothing left to do but take the tier 3 tower. You go and you throw because you were not strong enough. Yes, you may be strong enough to take the tower. You may be strong enough to kill enemy heroes, but together you are not strong enough to do that. And when you try to do that, you throw away your advantage, and suddenly you feel like, I cannot win this game because the enemy team has caught up, and now you're not able to kill them as easily outside the base, let alone when you make it to their tier 3 tower. So this is like I said, it's going to be its own topic because it's really big, but it is a dynamic objective, so don't think that you can just do it when you want. I don't know. Now this part's going to be a little goofy, I apologize for that. But I wanted to try to show a visualization of the golden experience in a given lane and how we can increase or decrease that amount and how we can make it relative between teams. So don't worry about the specific numbers. Honestly, a lot of these I don't know off the top of my head, but it's just more about the feeling you should have when you're playing the game. So here we have the passive gold. Everyone gets 85 gold per minute. And I did this based on one wave of creeps. So let's say 30 seconds, but you have two heroes here. So 85 gold in that time. Now here's the gold from if you were to get every last hit on the melee creeps and then the range creep. And here's the experience. No one has passive experience. So the experience from melee creeps and range creeps. Now let's say our carry got every last hit. Great job. He got all of this gold and his passive gold. So he ended up with about 200 gold and, we have our passive gold. In terms of experience, if we were both there, we split it. It looks to be about 240, so let's say 120 for both of us. Now, I could have backed away, and that would mean he got full experience for some creeps, and maybe I only split some of it. So maybe it's more of like a 160 to 80 split. But our team got this total amount, and perhaps I gave him a bit more. Now, the enemy team, let's say they also got all the last hits and everything, so they got the same amount as we did, and you can see that we are even. Now, what if we managed to deny one of their creeps? So, when you deny a creep, the enemy team gets 50% of the experience if they're in range, and no gold. So now we have the full amount from our wave, and the enemy team has most of it, but they missed the gold from one last hit, and they split 50% of the XP. Now, we have a very slight advantage here. It may not seem like a lot, but usually it builds up. If this keeps happening every wave, we're going to slowly get this advantage of 40 experience and 40 gold roughly, and that's going to slowly build up. We're going to hit level sooner, we're going to get items a little bit sooner, and Dota is a game about building small advantages and then using those to get more. So I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really does build up. Now let's go back to, let's say everyone's getting all last hits and experience. What if we tried to do a small camp pull? So we pulled the creep wave into the small camp, immediately killed all the small creeps so that none of our wave died, and then the wave went back to the lane. The enemy team got all of those creeps. So they have the same amount, that one creep wave, and we have their creep wave, but now we've also got our small camp. We have increased the total amount of gold and experience that was possible to us. And we have an advantage over them. But what if, let's say the hard support usually is the one that pulls, and the enemy 4 position came over and sapped some experience, stole some last hits. Usually it wouldn't be this perfect split because there's variance between the creeps and everything. And also the average small camp and hard camp, I'm just using the average numbers. Different camps have different golden experience, but again, we're not worried about the specific numbers. Now, if they came and sapped half the experience, you'll notice we're even again, but just at a higher total amount than before because we have this small camp as well. Now, what if we tried to pull the hard camp, but then we got zoned away so that the enemy team got our they got our creep wave plus the hard camp, whereas we were only able to get their creep wave. Say we went back to under our tower, I wasn't able to contest the hard camp or try to steal anything. You'll see they now have quite a large advantage over us. Even though we're getting the full amount from the lane that we possibly could, they have got the lane plus a camp. So not only have they established an advantage, but they are simply getting more than us. So I want that to now bring in the idea that sometimes we are okay with different results in the lane. Obviously, the most ideal result is that we get all the gold, all the experience, and the enemy team gets absolutely nothing, right? That would be the perfect game. But that just doesn't happen. So we know that's what we want, and we try to push ourselves as close to that as we can in general, but just realize it's pretty impractical to think that we could do that reasonably every game unless the enemy team was really bad. Sometimes we just want to be ahead of the enemy team. So we want to barely eke out an advantage from a small pull or something. And this is the case usually when you have a kill lane, and that as long as you're in the lead, you can kill the enemy team. So you're okay that they're getting the full experience out of the lane, as long as you're slightly ahead, because that gives you enough of an edge to kill them. And you don't really care that you're getting the smaller or less amount, right? So let's say both sides were denying each other, and so you're getting less gold overall, but you're in the advantage of the enemy team. You're kind of okay with that because you can still kill them. So you don't care that you are, say, level 3 instead of being level 4, because they're level 2 instead of level 3, and as long as you have that advantage, you're happy. Now, sometimes that is not the case. So let's go back to an even game. Sometimes all you care about is getting your carry as much gold as possible. So let's say you did a pull and you split the XP. You don't care that you split the XP because your carry simply got more gold. And in fact, what if they then pulled the hard camp? This isn't ideal because now they're in the lead, but you're still relatively happy because you're trying to get as much gold to your carry as possible. And so you don't really care how the enemy team is doing as long as you're getting your carry more gold with this small camp hold than they would have otherwise gotten, say, if they hadn't gotten these creeps, the gold from those creeps. This is not usually ideal because, how do you enter a lane and say, I want the enemy team to take the lead? That's not usually how it goes, but sometimes that's just how it has to be. When the enemy team has a strong offlaner and you have a weak laner, this tends to be the case where you just can't stop them from getting the advantage and getting more per wave than you. So all you care about is getting as much as possible to your carry, whether it's gold or experience. An example would be, say, Spectre, who she just really wants a lot of gold at the start. And usually she loses most of her lanes because she's just not that strong of a laner generally. So you kind of expect the enemy team to get more gold and XP in general than you, but you just try to help Spectre get as much as possible. Now, someone like Slark is a bit on the other side of that, where you want Slark to hit 6 as soon as possible because 6 lets him get free HP regen, an escape, everything. We just want him to get the experience. Obviously, we want him to get gold too, but if we can get him to level 6, he can begin jungling very quickly to catch up to everything he lost. Or we can leave the lane and he can get all of this to himself instead of splitting it with us. And he would like to be an advantage compared to the enemy team, but as long as he hits 6 quickly, he doesn't really mind if the enemy team... Well, maybe that's not fair. That's not fully true in all the cases. But let us go back to this. So I just want to re-emphasize that sometimes we just want to be ahead of the enemy team and we don't care about the exact amounts we're getting. And sometimes all we want are to get more amounts of gold or experience, and we don't care how that is relative to the enemy team. Obviously, we care to some degree, but when prioritizing, we don't care as much. We're going to end with a rough guideline on about what level you should aim for as a hard support relative to your carry. Now, the actual chart over there, that's from the Dota 2 wiki on experience. If seeing specific numbers helps you out, then there it is. Now, the poorly made stuff above me, that is what I recommend you aim for if you don't know better. So what I mean by that is that some supports want levels sooner, and they can do more with that. And other supports, they don't really care because they don't scale that well with experience. So they don't mind having slightly later timings. But what's above me is just this like average benchmark that if I saw support following this, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. That's like, I can't think of a case where that would be bad. So this is a good place to start until you get a better idea of how you want to tailor it to your specific hero and specific game. Now, I think it's actually useful to work backwards in this case. So let's think about hitting level 6 by 10 minutes. Now, getting our ultimate will open up a lot of options for us. Depends on your hero, kind of what you can do with that ultimate, but usually it means you can make some new plays that otherwise you wouldn't be able to. So it is good to hit your level 6. Now, hitting it too soon can be bad, actually, because that may mean that you're taking up too many resources from your carry. And if you hit level 6 and you see that you're a very similar level to your carry or other cores, you might start to question, like, maybe I'm sitting in the lane too much. Sometimes it happens, like the carry dies and then you get the kill, and oh no, this creep wave just died under tower. Haha, I got all the experience. That's okay if it happens every now and then, and that's it feels great as a hard support. But if that's happening every time, you have an issue. The other side of that, getting it too late, again, because it's opening up options for us, we want that sooner. So too late is generally bad. I would say around the 12-minute mark is acceptable. After that, you're starting to have some issues. Not that it doesn't happen, some games are rough. But again, when it's consistent, you need to start asking, like, am I moving around too much? Or am I dying too much? Like, why am I not hitting 6 by 10 minutes? 10 minutes is really this good middle ground to aim for. So, working backwards from that, being level 1 at the start, obviously, hitting level 2 at the same time, that's fine, because usually that extra skill point on a support helps the lane to stay competitive so that it's actually good for the core, right? If you got bullied out, the core is level 2, you're 1, the enemy is both level 2, they can bully you out with that extra spell, and now you're not getting like nearly as much out of the lane. So hitting that at the same time is usually good. Now, after that, it's okay to hit level 3 at the same time, I think. But this could also be when you can start like shifting a little bit of experience at a time towards your carry. So if they hit 3 and you're 2.5, I think that's okay. I also think it's fine to hit 3 at the same time, especially certain supports like Jakiro, who gets a lot of value out of his second skill point in his dual breath. That helps to secure the lane. So like it's generally good for the core to actually be around the same level. Now, after that is definitely when I would say, look, your carry really needs to be stronger than you at this point. So when they are 4, you could be about 3, and when they hit 5, you start to hit level 4. 3 and 4 is when you should have a point in all your abilities if you're one of those kind of heroes. Most heroes are that want, one of every skill. Some people want to go like a 2-1-0 build, and some want like 1-1-1. And by level 4, if you went a 2-1-0 build, you should now be 2-1-1. And so now you have all your abilities. And so 4 is a good place to be. Now you have all your abilities, and you should be able to do things with that. Usually the extra skill point is not such a game changer at this point to have like 3 levels in one of your abilities. Again, depends on the hero. So I wouldn't mind if the core is level 6 and you are level 4. Like, their ultimate is much more important than your level 5. Now, once we hit level 4, we're actually getting close to our goal because the Tome of Experience becomes available at the 10-minute mark. Now, the Tome is 700 experience. So what that translates to is that if you are level 4 and very close to 5, you're like at the edge of it, using the Tome will get you all the way to level 6. So what this means is that if it were around 7 minutes into the game and I hit level 4, I would be feeling pretty good. I'd be okay starting to move around a little bit. And, I'm not getting experience while I'm, say, moving to mid lane. But I know that I only need to get a little bit more experience in these next 3 minutes, and then I'll buy the tome and I'll hit my goal. So it really lets me know whether I still need to be in the lane trying to get some XP, trying to pull the camps a little bit, or if I'm free to start moving around. And that's why we want to plan backwards a bit. Now, at 10 minutes, the outposts also become available. You can plan for that, but at the same time, do know that the enemy team may try to cap both. So I try to not depend on that and try to plan like only on the tome, because every game, the tome will be available. Yes, sometimes a core player will buy it, which certainly hurts. But generally it is there and you should be able to get it. Now, do consider your other support because they also want to hit 6 by around the 10-minute mark. Now, usually the 4 position should be okay on their own because they're okay splitting XP more with the offlaner than, say, the 5 and 1 match. But if you look at the uh, scoreboard and you see that you're both level 4 around the same part of experience and it's getting close to 10 minutes, ask yourself whose ultimate is more important because maybe they should get the tome instead of yourself. Or if you are, say, 5.5, you're quite close to 6, and everyone else is 6, but maybe their levels are still more important than you might say, you know what, you can take the tome. I can just get like 1 or 2 creep waves and I'll be 6 by like the 11-minute mark, and that's fine. So don't feel like you always have to get the tome, and don't feel like you deserve to always get the tome. Really do think about how easily can I get the rest of the experience I need to hit 6, and is this tome going to have a bigger impact on someone else? Having said all that, usually the hard support is the one that needs it. So if you kind of default to buying it, I wouldn't blame you, but try to think about it at least a little bit. That is going to be it for this video. It's already quite long, but thank you very much if you made it through all of this. The next couple videos, and by couple I mean all of them, will be a lot more specific, I think, and refer to the ideas that I mentioned here. Yeah, that's going to be it. See you next time, hopefully. Please come back.